So hello, everybody, and welcome to a special conversation about photography with some close friends of Her Justice. I'm Amy Barish, and I'm lucky enough to be the executive director of Her Justice. And joining me today, we have Kathy Kaplan, who is Senior Counsel of Global Finance at Sidley Austin, our devoted auction chair, a former board member of Her Justice, and current chair of the Aperture Foundation Board. Natasha Schlesinger is the founder and chief curator at Artmuse and Artmuse Selects, and a close friend and supporter of Her Justice. And we have 7 amazing photographers who participate in our photography auction every year who are going to talk to us today about their work. Elizabeth Chiles, Hayden Greene, Bob Gruen, Gail Albert Halaban, Mark Lewis, Ruben Natal-San Miguel, and Lynn Savile. I want to thank you all for taking part in today's conversation. At Her Justice, we stand with women living in poverty in New York City, and we do that by training and mentoring volunteer attorneys to help them with their individual and systemic legal needs. We, in essence, shift the power of the private sector to women with these high-stakes legal needs in the areas of family, divorce, and immigration law. Because of the systemic inequities in our system, and because of the systemic inequities in access to legal systems and lawyers, most of our clients are women of color, most are mothers, and many of them were born in a country other than the United States. Our clients have really borne the brunt of the roller coaster that has been the last year more than anyone. At Her Justice, we work with thousands of women like this every year, and they help us see the world through their eyes, and then we try to use that vision to help us develop policy change. As you know, Her Justice had to make the tough decision to cancel our annual benefit at which we often talk to you about our work because of the COVID-19 virus. In the weeks after we decided to cancel the auction, we heard from so many people that you really hoped we would continue the auction portion of the benefit. And so it is with great excitement working with you that we are going to host our first online-only photography auction, which is launching on July 9th. I really want to thank Kathy Kaplan for continuing to play such a significant role in this event. And I wonder, Kathy, if you could say a few words about why you've stayed with Her Justice, why you've stayed involved with us, even though you've already left the board, and give us a little bit of a history of the event and your involvement with it.
I would be delighted to, Amy, and I'm so honored to still, frankly, be chairing the auction, and really thrilled that in this environment we've decided to go ahead with it, because I think a lot of people want to continue the support to Her Justice. Our auctions have been, this would have been and still is the 25th anniversary of the photo auction. And when I joined the board, which was a much smaller, scrappier board when I joined it, the original members of the board included gallerists, photo collectors, and they had come up with the idea 25 years ago, along with the then board, the executive director, Kathy Douglas, to fundraise through a photo auction. It was, at that time, actually a fairly unusual idea. It was pre the vast number of online auctions that we now have. And the early auctions were tiny and fun and fairly scrappy events. And it has grown over the years to be a much bigger gala, bigger event. But I think that the purpose has been the same. Most of us who are involved because of what Her Justice does. The deep commitment to the clients, the women, the children is incredible, outstanding, both in terms of the day-to-day legal work and the policy decisions it represents. So I am incredibly proud, and I'm incredibly proud of all the artists, the ones who are going to be on videos and the ones who aren't, who really for years, without hesitating, when they get the call, either call us first or offer up a wonderful piece to auction. It really is just a sign of the commitment to a very, very important cause. So thank you all for being here with us on the video today.
Thank you, Kathy, and I really second all photographers. The event obviously wouldn't be the same without you. And in the same way that our clients help us see the world through their eyes and it helps us make policy change, obviously you help us see the world through your eyes. And all of those sort of walking in other people's moccasins is so essential to life on the planet and certainly to the work of Her Justice. And I want to welcome Natasha and really thank you, Natasha, for your engagement with Her Justice. We met a couple of years ago, as I recall, when you were gathering people together sort of in the the beginning of the Me Too movement, gathering women together to talk about what role folks could play in lifting up the voices of women. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that and your engagement with Her Justice and why that sort of aligns with your vision as an art curator and expert.
Thank you very much for having me, for allowing me the opportunity to sort of to share with you and to do a little bit of what I do on a regular basis, you know, and to do this for such an important cause and organization. And I'm an immigrant myself. So for me, what you do is crucial and essential. My family came to this country in 1979 with the help of organizations like yours. And so I know the impact it can have on families, on, you know, families with children. So I really salute you with everything that you've been doing for so many years. And, you know, any organization that involves art is the organization I also, you know, I mean, that's what I do. So for me, any call to help, you know, is through art. And so, you know, as much as I can do. And of course, for me, women's voices, you know, and supporting each other is essential. You know, particularly in this fraught environment that we all live in, you know, if we don't support each other, you know, then how can we move forward? So I think that what you're doing very much aligns with what I've always believed, what I've always, you know, sort of strove to engage with, and, you know, through my curatorial work and through my advisory work and through my guidance, you know, organizations that have women's best interests at heart is sort of, for me, the most important. I actually stepped off on a board recently with particular goal to really go in more in the direction of the arts and organizations that support social justice and women's rights. So everything that you're doing really, again, aligns with mine, and I wanted to give it more time. And I did it right before the pandemic broke, so it was perfect opportunity then for me to just try to help you as much as I can, and perhaps that can grow in the future. And I think that you have all decided to keep the auction, you know, online is very apropos of the moment. I think people's attention, you know, is still focused on virtual ways of seeing art, and particularly looking for something to kind of to support, to engage with. So I think what you're doing is, I think should be very interesting and successful. So I hope that you know, and I will try as much as I can to help you to turn people's attention to what you're doing, and you know, really also to highlight the artists who are engaged with the cause. You have such an amazing variety of artists from all over the United States, you know, male, female, you know, who are really kind of join here forces to promote what you're doing and to highlight it and to really elevate the cause. So I'm very excited to partake in this as much as I can.
Great. Well, thank you. Without further ado, then, as we've been promoting your engagement and all these fabulous artists we have, let's set you forth to hear from the artists about their work.
Terrific. Okay, let me share my screen. So the first artist we will be presenting, I'll be showing and I'll be speaking with is Mark Lewis. And I think I chose this particular work, and I chose this, you know, this piece and the artist because I think nothing represents our moment better than this image. You know, it says everything about where it is, New York City, about, you know, what the moment is. But before we kind of go in to speak about the work, I just wanted to say a few words about the artist, Mark. Mark is an amateur photographer who's based in New York City, and his work really tells stories about, you know, about people, about situations, about the city where he lives. I know in 2017 he decided to use his camera to help educate both himself and those to whom the work is sort of about whom the work is, and to whom the work is presented, to help educate people and to present it as positive force for change. When you're seeing images, there's nothing like seeing an image, right? I mean, words are very impactful, as we can see in the image here, but it's really images that tell the full story. And the stories that he tells continue to change, you know, as the world evolves, as we live through different moments in time. And so storytelling through photography, through these opportunities. You know, there's abundant storytelling moments. And of course, having lived these past few months in New York City, we all are so aware of what has been happening and how New York has been transformed from a city, you know, in the middle of this pandemic with the greatest number of, you know, coronavirus sort of, you know, infection to the way that it has, again, changed, survived, sustained itself. And I think, you know, what you've been doing is incredibly impactful and important and poignant to everybody, you know, and for everybody to see. And this image that we have here, Black Lives Matter, now showing Do the Right Thing, sort of says it all. So I don't want to take up your time, but I want to turn the table to you and to ask you sort of how you chose this image, where it is for those who don't know New York, or, you know, where it is, it's in Brooklyn, but and, you know, why that moment was so important for you to sort of to document.
Sure, thank you, Natasha. So I live in Brooklyn, New York. This image was taken right on Prospect Park South at the movie theater called the Nighthawk. I essentially pass this place every day. In the mornings, I go out for a bike ride, and so very early in the morning. And the message on the boards changed a couple of months ago, where they put out now showing Do the Right Thing, Black Lives Matter. It had other things there beforehand. And so on this particular day, I was going to a protest at Grand Army Plaza, which was a bike protest. So over the past couple of months, due to the death of George Floyd, that sparked a whole wide movement around police brutality, systemic racism, and there have been a number of protests that we've all seen, essentially nationwide. So I got this image actually on my way back from the protest. And so I actually went to this location, and the words obviously there stood out, but I felt that I needed more to create the image that I was looking for. And so you can see the woman on the left she was having a discussion with another person, and then the woman coming into the image with a bike, I thought was quite telling, because I just came from a bike protest. And then kind of all three coupled together or joined together kind of gave me what I was looking for. So in this image, there's so much, one, about the Black Lives Matter piece. Do the Right Thing is from the Spike Lee movie, which came out in '89, which also talked about racism. So if you haven't seen that movie, it's something to see. So, and essentially I chose I shoot black and white and color, but I think from my perspective around protest and movements, I think the images are more impactful in black and white. And so I kind of saw this image in a black and white setting. So again, on this particular day, I just decided to shoot this. So I sat there actually for about an hour, trying to get the right composition and the right people involved in the image. But before I was happy with the final result.
And I'm looking through your website, you know, you've really been there during all the protests. There are so many images on your site with people marching. You're in the midst of it. You really are kind of, you know, you throw yourself right there, you know, along with the marchers, with the protesters. And I guess the question I have is, those are much more, you know, there's much more going on in those images. This is a much more still, kind of quiet way that you portray this. Why did you choose this one as opposed to showing a much more kind of, you know, activist one in your other series? Why this one for this particular auction?
I thought this one was more unique than the others. If you look at social media, you will see a lot of images based on what you just talked about being directly in the protests. So you do see a lot of work around that. This one, I don't think you see as much of. So I was looking for something that was a little bit more unique, which is why I wanted to submit this one to the Her Justice photo auction. So this one just spoke to me more so, and that's why I submitted it for its uniqueness.
For that. And what is your association, you know, your involvement with Her Justice in general?
Sure. My wife, Susanna Saul, is one of the directors in immigration side of Her Justice. So I've been connected to Her Justice for as long as I've been married to Susanna. So first off, I'm so proud of her dedication to the cause of Her Justice. Every day she shows her commitment to make it to impacting the lives of those less fortunate, that Amy kind of highlighted the whole mission around Her Justice. So I always support the mission, and in any way that I can assist in Her Justice achieving their goals, I am more than happy to participate. And so since I've been asked to provide an image every year for the photo auction, I am more than willing to contribute. I'm very happy to do that, and hopefully it's a force for change and helping Her Justice to accomplish its mission.
No, this is fantastic. And you are an amateur photographer here amongst you consider yourself to be an amateur photographer as opposed to professional. I guess a question for you I have is, who are some of the important influences in your, for your work, artistic influences?
Some of the more traditional ones, like I look at Ansel Adams's work from a landscape perspective. My primary, I'll shoot essentially everything, so I don't necessarily have I do have a focus, which is more street and documentary photography. And so I look at a lot of street photographers in terms of their work. One of the gentlemen who I follow his name is Maciek Dakowicz. He's a Polish street photographer, but he travels worldwide to do street photography, primarily in Southeast Asia, but he goes elsewhere. He's been very impactful in terms of showing me how to shoot. I actually had the privilege of attending one of his workshops in Vietnam. So his view and his way of shooting has been quite impactful to me, more so from learning techniques around shooting. And there's so much social media out there, so I really just look at a lot of photography, and essentially a lot of things will strike me. But from a street side, it's Maciek Dakowicz. From kind of landscapes, it's obviously going to the classics around Ansel Adams and some others as well.
That's great. Okay, well, thank you. I'm gonna move on, but this was, I mean, I love your image. This to me says it all in the most poignant and quiet way. So I think that it's a great way for our conversation to begin, in terms of what this moment is about and where we are, and what we're all doing here, and how we can all kind of be a little bit of positivity, for the good, for change, going forward for the future. And one of the most important things I think for photography is to point people in the right direction, to make us notice, to make us see. And that's something that you're doing. You're making people see. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Natasha.
Yeah, and I'm going to move on now. And this is Elizabeth Chiles. So Elizabeth is an American artist who is based in Austin, Texas. And her work is really, I mean, I've looked at so much of her work, and to me, it's all about sort of something woven images, the layering, the idea of where our perception meets the image of the world around us. And, in a very beautiful ways, because her works kind of beckon us to examine the world around us more closely, to sort of, to concentrate, to focus on things that we might perhaps overlook. She has graduated from Columbia University with a BA in art history, and then worked in galleries in Boston and moved to San Francisco, where she earned her MFA from San Francisco Art Institute. And since, it's been, I guess about 12 years that she's been living in Texas, and has had numerous solo exhibitions in places like the Austin Museum of Arts, the Texas Biennial in 2011, the Chelsea Art Museum. She also has taught theory and photography at UT Austin in Texas State and Southwestern University for numerous years. She also is served on the board of trustees and chaired the Austin Center for Photography programming, and serves as a mentor for young photographers. So very much, involved in photography, both as an artist and as an educator. And again, the work is complicated, I think, you know, and very painterly. And so I returned to this image, Elizabeth, and I wanted to ask you, first of all, sort of, I mean, we're in nature here in this image, you know, can you tell us a little bit about us, where it is, how you sort of, how the process works for you? What exactly, you know, how do you capture what you're seeing in you know, in front of you? It's not a simple single shot. How do you kind of create those layered effects, those woven kind of effects?
Yeah, thanks, Natasha. Yes, thank you. So this picture that I donated to her Justice auction is from a body of work I made called, that I entitled On Water. I made a group of pictures during historic flooding in Texas last year in 2019. And I photographed here in Austin on the Colorado River, which runs through the center of Austin. And the work was shot on film, on medium format film. The work is then processed, of course, and then I select a group of images that I think might work together to make a collage, to make a piece that starts to get at some of the questions I have around that landscape, how it is I feel the landscape can be perceived. And so those images are isolated, and I make high resolution scans here in my studio of those images. And then I start in Photoshop combining the images. And so it's a series of decisions about, you know, which part of which image is going to be used, how layering effects sort of complicate the space and speak to, are we looking down into the water here? Are we looking up into a tree canopy? This sort of disorientation, which I find at once beautiful, sort of some of the experience of being in nature and being overwhelmed by the sensory elements of light moving through space, very much in the, you know, classic impressionistic sense of that. But then also this sort of disorientation of like, what is happening in this landscape? And so some choices that I make in terms of the light bleeds, this kind of pale purple blue that you see sort of at the bottom and sort of has an atmospheric effect, but also is a little bit off. And then this sort of broad red bands, which of course are more distinct, which are actually the edges of the film that has been scanned and brought back into the picture. Those kinds of disruptions for me interrupt the sort of the reverie of the space and sort of bring into question what's happening in the space. So that's one experience that I have in the landscape that we live in now, is that at once it's absolutely beautiful and brings me to like places of deep peace and reverie. And also that there's a sense that I have every day of what is the health of this landscape and what am I actually called, how might I protect this landscape? How might I do something to sort of stand for it? So there's this double-edged sword that I feel in the landscape that's sort of part of how we all experience the natural world now, which is, you know, that it gives us what we need, and also that we need to do more.
And I mean, when I look at the image here, and again, it's isolated, I'm not showing, you know, your other body of work or other works, even the way that it might look on the wall. Some of your images almost come off the wall, like, you know, sort of you drape them. You really kind of play with space, you know, how the images are presented. But I see this also as a bit of an abstraction of the landscape. You know, there's something of a gestural kind of effect that's produced, you know, where it is disorienting, that you don't know if you're looking up, you're looking down, you're looking, which way should it be? And in that way, sort of the idea of the, you know, the horizon line and looking forward is really taken away. It's abstracted, which I think becomes kind of a really interesting play on the shapes, on the forms, on the colors that you're producing, and the layering effect as well. I think it almost goes beyond that impressionism into the abstract kind of mode of looking at a landscape that can produce so much, both recognizable and, in this case, a little bit of a distorting, a little bit of a kind of a mystical kind of feeling, perception. And I think so much of your work is about this idea of perception, right? What you're seeing, what you're not seeing, what sort of the mind's eye leads you to want to see, and what, at the same time, it's a bit sort of complicated. And again, I love the weaving effect, where you're perceiving the colors that you mentioned, the shapes, but at the same time, there's something much, more than that. And it has a really, I think, a very strong sublime almost kind of sense to the work. And so one question I have is, it's a work that's very much about seeing, the act of seeing, and the way that you perceive the landscape. Why did you choose this for Her Justice, for this particular auction?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's an image that I feel very connected to, as it was fairly recently done and exhibited here at Central Library in Austin. I had an exhibition called On Water last year, and this was a central piece in that exhibition. So it's a piece that's really relevant in my practice right now. And I would just say something that really struck me at the beginning of shelter in place with COVID-19 is how much I and everyone that I knew in Austin and really around the world was connecting more deeply with the nature that was around them, whether that was their local park, whether it was the garden in their backyard. Of course, everyone we knew, ourselves included, was building a garden in their backyard, and that the squirrels were loving. But this sense, I think, that we all have, that and know deeply that nature heals us. We are from nature. We are part of nature. This is our future. Is something that I think during shelter in place has just been even more apparent to everyone. Mm-hmm. And so, it feels, timeless to me, and also kind of the moment.
Wonderful. Yeah, I think it's very well said that nature heals us. And it's true, so many artists have turned to portraying it in their work during these past few months. And what is your relationship in terms of, with Her Justice, your involvement?
Yes, I've been donating works for a number of years, I think maybe 8 or so, I'm not exactly sure. Kathy Kaplan, who spoke earlier, is, as you know, a photography collector. And during my time working in art galleries, I had the great benefit of knowing her. And she has been a friend of mine now for, over about 15 years, I think. So, her involvement in it is profound, and the organization is incredible. I've had the opportunity to go to a couple of the auction benefits fundraisers in person, and have been deeply moved by the work that's being done by Her Justice. So I'm grateful to give every year and do anything that I can to help raise money for this wonderful organization.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, I will let you go and we'll move on to our next work and next artist. Thank you so much, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
So our next work is by Hayden Greene. Hayden actually is the director of multicultural affairs at Manhattan College and the coordinator of its multicultural center. He's also the former director of leadership development at Barnard College, my alma mater. So I salute you for that at Columbia University. Sort of point of threading here and interconnection. He's also, of course, an award-winning photographer, and his work has been published in magazines and in different publications and galleries in New York City. He also established the Green Light Photography that to provide sort of this an interesting point of view perspective, you know, a creative kind of vision to commercial photography. His latest project is Magritte Reimagined, and it's something that he's been working on. His work, looking through a number of his works, one always looks and finds color, patterns, you know, catching something in the view of the landscape that's in some ways abstract. It's kind of what we see. Oftentimes he inserts the viewer right into the scene, and we're no longer the distant observers, but we're active participants, you know, in the middle of the action. That's what I always find as a viewer in his work. Let me see if I have, oh yeah, there we go, Hayden. Okay, now I see you. I didn't see you before. So I think with the work like we have here for Her Justice auction, I actually find it to be in the same way. Usually photography kind of takes you a little bit aback. You're sort of a distant observer, you know, the waves or the beach somewhere out there. But in this case, you almost feel like you're you're right there in the water. You're in the lifeboat. You're somehow, you know, I don't want to say you're caught, but you're sort of surrounded by this water. You know, it's an image that we all recognize, but there's almost something a little bit, there's a little bit of an unnerving almost sense to where you present this, where you place us as viewers. So I wanted to ask you, you know, first of all, where did you take this picture? How did you do it? And, you know, and you know, why you selected this image as opposed to, you know, so many others that we're not able to see, but that you have. Why this image? I mean, it is summer after all. We are longing for the water, especially being in New York City. But you know, I'll leave it to you to sort of to talk to us about it.
Yeah, so this image was taken off Buku Reef, which is in Tobago, the islands of Trinidad and Tobago, which is my homeland. My family is from Trinidad. And
Okay.
so one of the things about me is that I am obsessed with waves. I love waves, especially oceanic waves, primarily because I like big, broad landscape pictures. I like, you know, pictures that have so many little bits of detail in different parts of the picture. And waves are landscapes that are constantly changing. Like I can point my camera at the exact same spot in an ocean and take 15 pictures, and each one of those pictures will be different, and that mystifies me. So you know, you're looking at peaks and valleys and plains almost that were not there 5 seconds ago. And sometimes it's a matter of chance. Sometimes you are waiting to see if something happens, but photographing waves is just so serene for me. And it also speaks to the non-permanence of life, right? So, you know, everything that we think is so important right now, in 10 years from now, we'll look back and laugh. It's like, why were we paying so much attention to that? Or things that we didn't think were important to us now are very substantial parts of our lives. So I think waves represent all of those different things. And this particular picture, like I said, was taken off the reef, and you can't see land. You don't know where you are. It could be any water, any place. And I enjoy that a lot. I like, you know, it's like, what's over the crest of those waves? What's to the left? What's to the right? I think that it's open for interpretation and open for the person looking at the picture to create their own narrative once they've looked at it.
Do you prefer for this image to be printed large?
I feel like it's a large image. I think that this is one of those things that you put over your couch, or you have in a place where people can look at it and either feel a sense of serenity or stand there and wonder, like, all of the questions that I just had, like, where did that wave go? Is that a big cresting wave, or is it the angle of the camera? As you know, good point of this is that every time, this is on a glass bottom boat. We took a glass bottom boat, so everybody else is taking their cameras and shooting down through the glass bottom, and I'm hanging out the side of the boat, trying to get this image. I have put my camera on a tripod and like leaned it off the side of a cruise ship in order to get other images. I've stood on the bow of a ship in the middle of a storm to get wave pictures that way. I'm just really obsessed with waves. So anytime I have an opportunity to, I do.
This image, this work is very painterly to me as well. You know, it again, because you're zooming in, you're so close, all you see is the water and the sky, and it almost feels like it could be, a painting. It has, it sort of has that, it's not a hyper realist way, but really there's a softness to the waves, to the way that you've captured them, the softness of the surface. And I just wondered, if you ever, when you capture images, are you ever considering sort of painting precedents in art history in general?
So yeah, that's, thank you for picking up on that. One of the things that I've been really leaning into is giving a painterly look to my photographs as of late. So, when I take a picture, I'm like, how does this translate as if somebody had painted this picture, and how am I going to shoot this to feel like a painting later on? It's definitely intentional. It's definitely, I want you, and in fact, there are some of my paintings, some of my photographs that people are like, wait, is that a painting or is that an actual photograph? Because of that exact same feeling. I want you to view it as art and not just a recreation of a scene, but like an artistic representation.
Yeah, there's a timelessness to that moment. I mean, again, it can be anywhere, anytime, and it makes, there's an emotional kind of connection, I think, that a viewer feels looking at this. We all have our own memories and our own associations with water. Sometimes they could be, a point of danger, and other times a point of, sort of a letting it all go. I'm actually heading to the ocean today. So I'm looking at this image, looking forward to seeing exactly that. So it just depends on, going back to childhood, what is your connection to the water and to the ocean, and, which is what you bring to the work. And I think that people will draw their own connections, their own memories when they're looking at it, but you really are putting us right in the middle of it in a very, again, timeless way. So my question that I'm asking every artist here is, you picked this image for the auction. What is your connection to Her Justice, your, participation with them, and, why did you pick this one for the auction?
It's really interesting because my wife, when she was a first year in law at her law firm, used to do pro bono work with Her Justice, and then she became part of the junior board, and I was always her +1. And then, as you mentioned, I used to be the director of leadership development at Barnard College, and I would bring my leadership class to Her Justice to see leadership in motion, but especially leadership from a woman's point of view, so that they could see strong women in leadership. And then as I got exposed to the art auction, the photography auction, I was like, I really want to donate a couple of pieces. And once that started, it never stopped. And so my wife cycled off of the junior board, and I pretty much cycled on as almost a full-time volunteer with Her Justice. And so I went from being her +1 to her being my +1. So
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much. Yeah, this is great. I love that we went from Elizabeth's work, which was, the landscape and the trees and the water was somewhere deep in there, to, the landscape bring us the water full front center. So love the work. Thank you so much. And we are moving on to our next artist, and we're going to be going into kind of an urban environment. This is Gail Albert Halaban, and I've actually have worked with Gail, have known Gail for some years, and I've loved her work for the years, all the years that I've known, with different series that she presents us with. Gail photographs out of windows into other windows, into people's lives, into people's apartments, into people's homes, to reveal an intimacy, a casualness, the moments in life that we all live through, that she captures in this sort of urban exploration and intersection between architecture, capturing the intimate moments within the, within the architecture, and the ways that one human being can see into another human being's lives. It's not exactly like the peeping Tom, because permissions are given ahead of time. These people know that they're being photographed, but they are very, very casual about the way that they go on with their daily activities. And she has photographed in Manhattan, in Paris. She's photographed in Istanbul and Venice and Buenos Aires and Florence. She's created a whole body of work, a whole series of looking into the different neighborhoods, into the lives of people all around the world. She also has an ongoing series that's called Hopper Redux, which are inspired by Edward Hopper's paintings. And we all know that famous, iconic American artist for whom looking at cities, at people's lives as we pass by was the sort of the way that he worked. And I love the way that Gail captures it in her photography. She received her BA from Brown University and her MFA in photography at Yale University. She also has 3 monographs of her work, including Out of My Window from 2012, Paris Views and Italian Views from 2019. Her work is in collections of the George Eastman Museum, Yale University Art Gallery, Nelson Atkins Museum, the Caliban Museum and Wichita Art Museum. And the George Eastman Museum in Rochester, New York presented a solo exhibition of her work Out of My Window. And in June of 2019, last year, she had a show at her gallery in Manhattan, Edwin Hawk Gallery. So here's an image from the series, that take us to Italy, family dinner, San Marco, Venice, Italy. I think particularly also poignant in light of social distancing that we all have been experiencing in the last 3 months. The fact that Italy was in the epicenter of the pandemic just some months ago, not there anymore, the way the United States, is, but almost sort of the way that we have all stayed at home, looked out of our windows into other people's lives, perhaps, not able to really connect with them physically, but looking at somebody from a distance. I think this image in particular and Gail, your work in general really, I think, strikes home how isolation has affected the way that we look at other people and other people's lives in that distance, from that distant view, or perhaps through Zoom. And I wanted to ask you about this image, how that came about, and just to kind of get a perspective on your perspective on, who this family was, how you chose this, and actually also why you chose this particular image, because you have so many out of your very extensive body of work.
Thank you so much. It's great to see you. This is from a series in Venice, Italy, my most recent project. And I photograph generally windows within the architecture. And usually my pictures, you see much more of the architecture. I chose this one because during the quarantine, I really felt the sense that my neighbors were my only company. Like, I felt so isolated, but being able to look into these windows, and I have this picture on my wall at home, gave me a sense of comfort and a sense of community. And I think that's what this project has been about for me overall, is if we take a moment and look at our neighbors, and we'll realize they're not so different than us, even if they live in a fancier apartment or have different rituals. Like, most of us do similar things when we're home with our family. Like, we cook dinner, this is Sunday lunch. And I feel like we'll have much more of a sense of connection and much less of a sense of loneliness in this strange time. And I did choose Italy because Italy really was the epicenter for so long. And when I made the donation, Italy was so much worse than us in the US, so that's obviously changed now.
Yeah. Did you know the family, or did you meet them just specifically for the photograph?
So for every picture I do, as you know, because you've introduced me to some people in Italy, I meet one person who then helps me go meet their neighbor. So I didn't know them when I arrived in Italy. I met their neighbor first, and their neighbor introduced me to them. So everywhere I've gone around the world, people have welcomed me into their homes and treated me like a friend, but no, I don't know anybody before I go.
For that, right. And did you actually eat that dinner with them?
Yes, it was delicious. That was the best part of photographing in Italy, is after every shoot, even if food was not involved, people had me over for meals.
I couldn't imagine not wanting to eat. I don't even know exactly what they're making, but whatever they're making, it looks really, really good. And I love also the colors. I wanted to ask you about, you know, they knew that you were taking the picture. Did you, do you coordinate? Do you direct at all? You know, how much of what we're seeing do you direct?
My pictures are very staged and directed, and that's intentional because I don't want to be a peeping Tom. I want people to be able to participate and collaborate with me, so that I'm picturing what the neighbor sees into the window, but also how people want to be seen. I think it's important that people have some role in how they're portrayed. My pictures are seen all over the world, and I feel like people have a right to participate in that. So yeah, I help pick out the clothes, I help style the food, I help. They're all lit, they're all directed. I'm talking to them while I'm photographing them.
While you're doing, yeah. I think the first image that I remember seeing of your work and loving so much was this image of you in Paris, where, you know, you have the mansard, like on the rooftops, you're looking at a man having a cup of coffee across, you know, in the window, there's like a coffee cup that he's holding. And it was just like, I love Paris. And for me, that's the most poetic, romantic city that I would, you know, that I always think about. And that picture just was just so perfect to the, you know, the classic kind of eternal romanticism, you know, of and poetry of a city of, and you know.
And I also love that he's having coffee, and I probably have somebody in Istanbul having coffee, and in Palermo having coffee, and Buenos Aires. And so I love that Paris picture is one of my favorites also. But I like the fact that as I've traveled over the world, I've seen that we all kind of do the same thing, and there's such disconnection in the world right now. It's nice to be able to look into the windows and realize we're all
and in that way, your work is really a genre scene. You know, it becomes sort of like a genre. You know, it reminds me of some Dutch 17th century, you know, interior scenes with people, again, going about their lives, you know, whatever they might be doing, meeting each other, drinking. You know, there's something of that, like storytelling. You're composing it, you're directing it, it's almost like a film still, but the narrative is really open-ended. You fill in the blanks, you begin and end it the way you want to as a viewer. And so we're sort of at that kind of a moment. We have no idea who that family is, what they're doing. They seem to be, you know, cordial to each other, but we don't know, you know, and it's somebody else's life that seemingly, you know, looks like yours, but again, the intrigue, there's something so cinematic also about your work, which I think is, again, you really are very unique in how you do this, where you're looking at a city, but at the same time, you create this very personal approach to a city through people's lives. That's really, so we are, you know, not just tourists, we're kind of given this interior view of the inhabitants of, you know, of any city, which is great. So I have a question for you again. I mean, you chose this one because of the pandemic. What is your relationship with Her Justice?
I've grown up with Her Justice. Right after I got out of graduate school, my sister was a lawyer for Her Justice, and I had no art career at the time, but she asked me to donate a piece, which she ended up buying for $700 because no one else was bidding on it. And then as my career has evolved every year, through the years, I've continued to donate, which has been great. I feel like my work is so much about family and connection, and Her Justice really is about helping families. So I feel like my work parallels the mission of Her Justice. And I also feel like as a photographer, we rarely have the opportunity to do good in the world. So this, I mean, I think art is important, but to be able to tangibly help people has been really exciting.
Well, I have to actually quote, I have to quote Gerhard Richter, who said that art is the highest form of hope. So if we can apply that sentiment to the works of photographers, of artists, I think then art has a very important place in helping, you know, because it gives us hope. And I think that's essential, particularly for an organization like Her Justice that gives hope to so many. So thank you very much.
Thank you very
for
much.
contribution. Okay, and we are moving on. Oh, here's here's a better image, but to Bob Gruen. And Bob is one of the most respected and best known photographers in rock and roll since the mid 1970s, regarded as the foremost documentarians of the scene and working with major talents from John Lennon and Yoko Ono and Tina Turner and Rolling Stones and Led Zeppelin, Elton John, The Kiss, covering really the emerging new wave and punk bands, including the New York Dolls, Patti Smith, Clash, Sex Pistols, Ramones, and Blondie, who of course I know you can see here. He started his career as being, when he moved to, in 1971 to New York, he became John Lennon and Yoko Ono's personal photographer and friend. So from that moment on, really making photos and documenting these very dynamic and very dramatic and people was something of a mission and a life's journey. He was a chief photographer for Rock Scene magazine in the 70s. And photography became sort of this candid view of the stars and the rock and roll stars who he followed, captured, became friends with, documented in many different ways, which I think is so interesting. And there is actually a film that was also done about his work recently, not so long ago. Let's see, it was in 2011 that the director Don Letts made a feature-length film titled Rock and Roll Exposed, the photography of Bob Gruen. So that was very telling about the standing of Bob Gruen. So this is a photograph we can all recognize. This is Debbie Harry, Blondie, 1976. It's an incredible image. It really sort of, it's New York City, right? We've just seen the New York City during the first picture with Mark Lewis, during the pandemic, the way, you know, the emptiness, of the streets. But here, of course, is New York City in the throes of glamour and action, and, you know, being illuminated by stars like Debbie Harry. So Bob, I question for you as to, you know, please put us in the moment, put us into the scene, tell us what is happening, how this picture came about. I know that Debbie Harry was another favorite subject of yours. And where was this, and what do what are we seeing here?
Well, this was actually in the back room of Max's Kansas City. In 1976, Blondie was still a kind of up and coming unknown group. There was probably maybe 100 people at most in the audience. I should point out that Debbie made that dress from a pillowcase. She writes about it in her book, that she found a pillowcase and she made that dress out of it. She's wearing a kind of military hat, and I believe the song they were doing is an odd song, a cover of a Romy Haag song, the German Chanteuse. And it was quite a fun night. They were just beginning their career, as I said, but you know, learning how to do it, but still just great. I mean, Debbie's always been one of the most beautiful women I've ever seen. It's not hard to take a good picture of Debbie Harry. All you got to do is point the camera at her. She always looks good, and she's a great personality. She's very upfront, a very forthright, a very strong personality, and a lot of fun to be with. She's a very funny person.
Yeah, so she was in
yesterday. Yesterday was her birthday, so I was
that's so funny. Oh my gosh, are you still in touch with her?
Yeah, I sent her a happy birthday message yesterday. Heard back from her.
Oh, fabulous! And does she know that this work is going to be at the auction?
I'm not sure. We didn't really talk about it.
You'd have to
But
tag
she's
her.
quite, you know, she herself supports many good causes. She's quite a giving person, very generous person.
So she's in her 20s here.
Well, actually, Debbie always looked like a teenager, but I think she's about 32 there.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
31. I think in that picture,
All
yeah,
right,
she's 31.
close enough.
Who's counting, you know?
Exactly. Very, very close,
Yeah.
close enough. And I mean, you have so many photographs. I was looking, you know, through your work, and once I start, it's hard to stop because you're sort of. I mean, I only came to this country in 1979, so 76 I wasn't here. But for me, it's just fascinating. You know, that you were clearly so close to the musicians because you weren't an outsider. You really every photograph you take feels like you're the insider. You're in there. You know, they're allowing you. It's they sort of see you as one of their own. I don't know if that's how you felt as well.
Well, yes. I get the most candid pictures by being, involved in a scene. Like people ask me, how do you get to be inconspicuous in a certain situation? I said, by being part of the situation.
Right.
And I just had a knack of being friendly with musicians. I mean, since high school, I had a similar lifestyle, staying up late at night and, enjoying music. And most of my friends are artists and musicians. So being in the scene and part of the scene just came naturally to me. And I think that helped to get a lot of the candid kind of personal photos that I've got with different bands. I was on the bus with the Clash and the Sex Pistols going across America back and forth, traveling with the Ramones. Actually, my career started 50 years ago next week. July 8th is the anniversary of the night that I took a multiple image picture of Tina Turner. Where Tina was dancing to a strobe light, and I took a 1 second picture, and I got 5 different images, and happened to run into Ike and Tina a few days later at one of their shows, and they liked the pictures, and they took me on the road with them, and I started traveling. My first album cover actually was a Tina Turner picture that was came out in the spring of 1971. So July 8th is the 50-year anniversary, basically, of the my real career.
That's amazing. Oh my gosh. Well, you do not look like you have a 50-year anniversary in a career. So.
Well, yeah, and actually I have a biography. I've just written an autobiography.
Oh, fantastic.
This is probably backwards, right? But it says Right Place, Right Time. It'll be out in October, telling loads of stories, my life story. So.
Oh, that's good. That's good to know. I have 2 more questions for you. One is there a good story, short story, quick story you can tell us about Debbie Harry?
Well, loads of them.
Anything like,
I don't know. Well, I mean, the fact that she made that dress, and I don't know where she's wearing a necklace made out of some kind of, it looks like teeth or something.
It does, yes.
Animal teeth. I don't know where that came from. Yeah. But Debbie is homemade. She's not styled. She styles herself. She's always been very eclectic, but very interesting, and a very punky, but very forward fashion sense. She really has a great sense of style. And a great sense of humor.
Great to know.
That's one of the reasons
she's an icon. We always feel, she's sort of so iconic and she's so unreachable. She's always on that stage. She's like,
but she's not haughty. She's not haughty or standoffish or diva-like in any way. I mean, she's a very down-to-earth. She could be the girl next door, except she happens to be the most beautiful girl in the world.
Yeah, it's amazing. I love that. I love it. I love this image. I love that you picked that. You have so many to pick from. I mean, it's endless. Again, once I started looking, I think I spent like an hour just going through all the how can I possibly, stop? Where's the stopping point? So amazing tour. And my final question. So, what is your involvement with Her Justice? Why are you dedicated to the cause? I know that you have been involved with them for a long time. Maybe a few words about that.
I know. I was trying to think of it. I've been involved for so long, I can't remember when it started. It had a
when
different name.
When you were involved.
There was a different name before Her Justice. And I've actually been thrilled that the organization uses a photography auction so that I can be part of it and a regular part of it. Yeah. For me, my mother and father were both lawyers. My mother graduated from law school in 1932 at the height of the Depression. I've always just been drawn to powerful women. I never questioned that. My mom worked her whole life. In the 30s, she got involved in bringing people, rescuing people from Germany, coming to America, getting them visas. And she spent the rest of her life as an immigration lawyer, helping people come and start lives in America. She was also very involved. And my mom's the kind of person who became, when she joined an organization, she became president. She wouldn't just join and go to a couple of meetings. She'd become president and really reorganize and make the organization a lot better. Everything from her Temple Sisterhood to become the national president of the sisterhoods all across America, to B'nai B'rith, to hospitals in Israel, all kinds of organizations. And my mom taught me to help people, that, you know, if you can, it's just the right thing to do. And so when Her Justice came to me, it just made total sense. A group of lawyers, you know, that needs a photographer, I'm like, I'm there. It was so easy for me to be part of it. And I think that Her Justice does such great, truly important work. You know, starting my career with Ike and Tina Turner, I know that story. You know, certainly the movie about Tina Turner, What Love Got to Do with It, opened up this whole issue. It was not so widely known before that, but once Tina made it public, and, you know, the fact that a woman like Tina could be totally involved in a captive situation where she was, you know, violently hurt often, really brought this issue home to an international audience. So I felt that was very important. In my life, I actually knew Ike Turner. I don't think he necessarily was the poster boy, but I think the issue was so important that it was great that this came out, and I'm really happy to be able to help.
Fantastic. Yeah. Thank you. I love all the involvement. I mean, I think most of the photographers I've asked today, there's this family connection that they have through their spouse or through, you know, or for you, it's your parents. I love the fact that that's really the organization also kind of encourages or just allows people to kind of connect with each other's family members and support each other that way and support the organization. Somehow there's all this family connections, which is amazing.
It was very important for me, you know, living a rock and roll life. My mom was not always proud of me. She lived long enough to see me get some respect and have big major shows, but being in this organization for me is really vindication of the lifestyle I led, and that it leads to actually something good is very rewarding.
Fantastic. Well, I salute you. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Really fun to talk to you. Yeah, thank you. Okay, we're gonna move on to our next photographer is Ruben Natal-San Miguel. Is an incredibly interesting, varied artist because he's an architect and a fine art photographer and a curator and a creative director and a critic. So, you know, allowing kind of various aspects of seeing the world and registering the world and documenting the world to play out through his work. He holds numerous awards in different mediums and collaborations with, for example, photo icons such as Magnum photographer Susan Mizels, and multiple gallery shows in galleries such as Asia Gaisberg and Rush Arts and Chris Grove's projects and Fuchs projects. His work has been featured in numerous institutions as well: New York Public Library, the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, Griffin Museum of Photography, Print Art Center, the Makeshift Museum in Los Angeles, University of Washington, El Museo del Barrio, many other museums. I know that there is a show, or his work will be included in a show coming up recently. Perhaps, Ruben, you will talk about that. He has been presented in various international art fairs and featured in publications. And the work is kind of involves, there's a lot of what you document, Ruben, is people and people within cities in particular, and such is the case with this present work that you are contributing to the auction, 3 Muslim Girls, Sundown 2019, the Bronx, New York City. It's interesting because the work is done before 2020, before the pandemic, and it really presents the city in its colorful nature, in its variety, in its past and its present. And I wanted to talk about your perspective on why you wanted this image to be captured, what it represents, what it stands for. How did you see it? You know, how did it play out? How did the 3 girls come across your path? Tell us a little bit about what we're seeing here.
Hi, good morning, everyone. The image came about me being obsessed with the Jerome subway street station. It was featured in a small video on News Channel 4. Darlene Rodriguez was sort of like promoting the Bronx. And I saw her standing there. I'm like, oh my God, I really got to go there. So I went and I sat on the steps and I waited for someone to come down that really evoked me, moved me. And these three girls came out of nowhere. And they stood there for 1 second, and there's the photo.
Wow. So it wasn't even posed. It was just, this is what.
No, I don't post my work. I don't post my work. And I like to go to mostly marginalized communities in the city to see how they practice their quiet activism and how people interact with each other within a community from all walks of life. And it's really what the true essence of New York really is right now, because Manhattan is just Sex and the City bubble, and when you go out there, you really see what life New York has always been about, New York City has always been about. So for me, it's very important to bring that back and try to put it in the art marketplace and in the, non-for-profit and gallery system and museums, because it's still going. Yet, some people had rejections about it, and, I'm sure now with all the revolts and everything, it's going to be embraced, but I have been doing this work for 17 years. I'm a self-taught photographer, and I took it upon myself after surviving 9/11 to start photographing after moving to Harlem, start seeing a new world. So,
yeah, and I mean, it's incredible that these girls create such a composition with these two flower dresses, full outfits, and then the black one in the middle, and then they contrast with that the yellow tones of the background, and the American flag right there in the center. I mean, it's there's so much to this image that really, there's so much to the story, to this one moment in time, and yet it tells a very broad, very large picture about this country, the city, the New York City in particular, the moment in time. So I just wondered, I mean, I know you've been photographing during the pandemic. I know you've been going out, as you always have, on the streets and really capturing the way that the city is. I know that you said in our earlier conversation, you're not photographing people with masks anymore, right? You want to sort of like move beyond that. Well, why did you pick this particular image rather than something you've done more recently?
Because this image, the minute I took it, I thought immediately about women, and I thought Her Justice is an organization committed to women, and I really immediately thought that a week after I took the photo, the Me Museum asked me to be included in their permanent collection. Oh, wow. And then the St. Louis Museum also is in progress right now, and the Museum of the City of New York. So, once I sold a few and it goes into museums, for me, it's like, okay, it's back to the people.
Yeah.
So, that's the way I kind of, organize and structure my own personal career, because the images are coming from the people and eventually they got to go back to the people. So once it's, I also thought that at that particular moment, it was taken on October 13, 2019. There was a lot of xenophobia and homophobia coming from all places. And it was a gift from God. It just happened to be there, and I happened to be at the right time. I sat there for 45 minutes. These girls came down the steps, and I was very emotional. No, it was very emotional for me, especially the way, a museum curator immediately wanted it for a collection, and and then I sold a few, and then another person paid $1,000 for a 10 by 10 inches. So I'd say, okay, we got something going here. So let me give a very big one to Her Justice. So you guys got the largest one. That's
nice. Okay.
Yeah, the largest one ever. Even at my show, it's at Postmasters Gallery right now, and the show Women Are Beautiful. I did a whole show 50 years later after Gary Winogrand's series and interpretation with more inclusivity, and that image is part of the show as well.
Yeah, and the final question is your involvement with Her Justice. How did you get involved, and how long have you been working with them?
I don't remember who found me, but I think someone emailed me, and I just again, once images that I have go through the system and they go to auctions and they go to institutions, I just donate because it's got to go back to the people, and I really want to insert more images of diversity and inclusiveness in the marketplace. You know, I think that they need to be seen and shown, you know, and that's my commitment to photography. That's what I like to do.
Yeah, and what do you like about Her Justice in terms of the work that they do?
Well, I mean, you know, I love the fact that they really deal with immigration issues for women, immigration, you know, women who have suffered, you know, spousal abuse and et cetera, et cetera. I mean, anything. I'm a feminist. You know, if anyone has a chance to see my Choa Postmasters, I put the link in the comments. It's up to 11. You could really see why I'm doing this.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you for your contribution.
Thank
you. Okay. Take care. And now we have our final photographer, the final work, and that is the photographer Lynn Savile, who specializes in photography of cities, and really not just city and place, but actually the moment, the kind of time period between twilight and dawn. So her photography captures this really, I think, the most mysterious, the most unsettling but quiet also period of time where she captures the moonlight and street lights and you know, empty streets in terms of the spaces that where she goes and she photographs transitional kind of moments in time, that time span where most places that we find ourselves in are empty, or devoid of people. There is kind of a quietness, the sort of a solitude and solitary aspect to the urban or the landscape itself. It's about light, it's about space, it's about the sort of I find that the works, I was looking at, you know, various the various iteration of her works, and they're all they're kind of suspended, you know, in this moment. There is sort of this mystery about all of the images. Lynn was born in North Carolina, sorry, and then works in New York City. Earned her BA from Duke University and then her MFA from Pratt Institute, and has been widely exhibited in the United States and abroad. You know, places like Photographers Gallery London, the Brooklyn Museum in New York, the Mint Museum in Charlotte, North Carolina, the Tucson Museum and the National Museum of Art, and at Duke University as well. Her work actually can be found in many public art collections, such as the National Portrait Gallery in London, and the Brooklyn Museum and Los Angeles County Museum and Museum of Fine Arts in Houston, amongst others. And actually she's also had 4 monographs published of her work. So a very well-known photographer. And I love the statement, the quote, how she describes her work, that the work is about the boundary times between night and day. This, one of the artists I've worked with has done as also a series, and she calls it the bluing hour, this kind of light. I think what's amazing about so much of the work is the light that is captured during those moments in time. And so here's Mulberry Street, New York. And again, anything to do with New York right now is sort of like almost an emotional kind of a response that I think it brings to viewers. And it is this, the place where, you know, and the time when there are no passerbys, there are no people, you only see the trees and you only see the architecture, but in the shadows at play, there's something incredibly meditative about the work, very quiet, very subtle, very soft. So I wanted, Lynn, to ask you, well, first of all, what time of the night or of the evening this was? What made you look at this particular, what made you choose this image? How did you come about taking a photograph and capturing this?
Well, I'm a real passionate New Yorker. I first came to New York as a child. My parents were going by ship over to Europe. And I had, you know, it was my first experience in the city, and I just fell completely in love with it. So as soon as I had the opportunity to move here, I did, and used going to Pratt Institute as my excuse for moving to New York. And even as an early photographer back then, I was drawn to places like, this is old St. Patrick's Cathedral in Tribeca. No, I guess it's Soho. And it's just a very beautifully classic place, and reminded me somewhat of the places I loved in Italy when we lived there on the sabbaticals. So I photographed this very similar position in black and white many years ago, and there was no one in the picture. It was a little bit darker at night. And so I walk around a lot and came back to this place and was really struck by I had switched to color, and the way it looked in color, you know, with the tree at that point in its resonance, it just really excited me. And then the fellow standing there, it felt very poignant because he seemed so sort of serene and still, but the wall itself, and he seemed to fit into the wall and fit comfortably into the position he took in the wall, and was just there. And then, you know, you just have this feeling of time having passed, because the wall, you see this wall on Mulberry Street, but around the corner is an even longer wall, and it sort of undulates, and it has so much kind of almost like graffiti of history, even though it's not actually words, but you know, you feel like the sense of time imprinted on the wall. And also I spent a bunch of time in Vermont in the summers, and as a kid, and I really loved the town square. And to me, this place, because that's a wall that goes around a graveyard, and it's beautifully full of these trees, and at this time of night with the lights, the artificial light, so resonating with the sky, it just really struck me. To tell you the truth, I often kind of haunt a place. Like I may go back many times, and I don't typically, I'm different from Gail's Halabans in that I don't direct it. I wouldn't mind directing, but I tend to find a person or a place more than to set it up. And this man was standing there, and luckily I was all ready to take the picture. But so
it's a very Hopper moment for me. Like this scene is very Hopper, kind of, again, with a singular figure and just the light, the way it is. What time of the night was it?
It was really kind of mid to late twilight. You know, the sun sets, and then maybe you have a half an hour to 45 minutes before it gets dark, and it was getting toward the darker. So it's difficult because I love this time, or the dawn, it's similar, and it's such a short time period. So a lot of times I have to go back or just wait. And I was just really happy that man was standing there. And as you mentioned in the introduction, I often have photographed places that had no people. Then over time, people, because of the tripod and the longer exposures, people might just not even know I'm taking a picture, and they might walk right through the picture, which at first I started to sort of curse under my breath, like, what, you just wrecked my picture. I would never say anything out loud, but then I realized that a lot of times they actually improved the picture, you know. It's so I didn't have to just be there by myself in this kind of reverie. Yeah, the person was experiencing it too, almost as a surrogate, you know, and I find it very poignant with and without the people.
Do you not sleep much at night?
It's funny because I'm a real early bird, so it's hard in this time of year when the twilight is so late. It's like we usually don't even eat dinner till I get home, so it's like we're talking like 10 o'clock suppers. But yes, I do go to bed fairly late.
Right, for that too, to be. I mean, I think it's such a amazing opportunity. I mean, the way that you capture, usually people who photograph or who paint nighttime, it's because, you know, it's an extension of their work, but this is really your focus. And I find the endless variations of how you see this time period is really an incredible. It's an opportunity to kind of dream, You know, there is a bit of, again, mystery, and again, it brings all kinds of associations, but there's always, you know, none of it is ever dangerous or in any way sort of, it's something, you know, too edgy. It's really much more dreamlike, much more, sometimes a bit surreal, some of your work, you know, even here, you know, there's a little bit of that, you know, it just allows you to kind of think further what it is that you're seeing. You know, first of all, even though it says Mulberry Street, and for me, there's almost like a monastery in Italy, as you're, you know, that you're out. That's what kind of I'm seeing. So is it really New York? You know, it makes you kind of think twice about what it is that you're looking, and because you're capturing in such a moody way, there's such a mood to your works. So I mean, for me, it's very appropriate, you know, choosing a New York scene, Mulberry Street, downtown, particularly for this auction. But what has your involvement with Her Justice? How long does it go? Why do you, you know, support it? Just what's your relationship with the organization?
Well, sometimes organizations reach out to my gallery, Yancey Richardson, and ask for me to particularly donate, and I always am honored to accept and do so. And I don't remember if originally that's how it started, or it could be my happy association with Kathy Kaplan and Gail Halaban that have, you know, introduced me to the auction, and I'm very supportive of it. I mean, as you mentioned, I grew up in North Carolina, and I was certainly well aware of many people, women who needed help. And so the fact that your association does that means a lot to me. And so I'm very happy to be able to donate in support.
For that, wonderful. Well, thank you very much. I mean, that concludes my part.
Thank you.
You know, having this roundtable discussion with the artists about the works in the auction, and I hope that it will do so well. I hope that we can turn people's attention to both the works and the cause and the organization. And I will now pass on the spotlight and the microphone to Her Justice. Back to you.
Thanks, Natasha. This is Amy again, and thank you so much to all of the artists. It was really wonderful to hear a little bit of the background of all of the pieces, what the connection with the pieces is for the artist with Her Justice and the work that we do. And as you brought out, Natasha, the sort of familial relationship that Her Justice has developed over time with the photographers and the way in which they came to join Her Justice. It's a moving testament, and I'm really moved by how generous all of the artists have been with us over the years, the connections that they make with their work and our work, and their generosity in sharing some of these images with us. So I thank everyone for joining us in this interesting conversation and making the connection between the photography and the work. I hope you'll check out the online auction and really appreciate the artist support for the important work of Her Justice. So thanks to everyone who joined us today.